All right, at this time, we'll call this meeting to order. Please silence any cell phones or electronic devices that you may have at this time. Val, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Penny?
Here.
Commissioner Curry?
Here.
Commissioner Danio?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson? Here. Mayor Villa?
Here. Now, at this time, I'd ask you all to stand for the invocation and continue standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you today to ask you to guide our thoughts and our decisions. Dear Lord, we ask you to lift those up that have been affected by this coronavirus, dear God, and we ask you to be with them and to help heal our economy and bring us all back. Dear God, we ask you for a cure. Dear Lord, we ask you to bless our city and our citizens and ask you and thank you for allowing us to make decisions up here. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, at this time, we will recess the City Commission meeting and convene as the CRA. The first item, first and only item, is CRA Agenda Item 2020-R-20. Joe?
Resolution 2020-R-20, a resolution of the Community Redevelopment Agency, the CRA, of the City of Holly Hill, Florida, approving change order number 4 to the US 1 Utility Underground Project to Carter Electric and waiving of formal bidding and authorizing the city manager to execute the change order for an amount not to exceed $39,149.13 and 365 additional days.
Thank you, Mr. Forte. Take it away, Antoine.
Antoine Puri, Public Works. This is change order number 4. Change order number 3 was a deductive change order, but after we finished the work on the city and Carter finished the work along the US 1 corridor, FPL came back with some requirements, additional requirements, that changed their design on some of the side streets where the pole location moved due to challenges with pole locations. And also they requested some bollards to be installed in front of their risers and things like that. And then also they wanted a stakeout of every easement that we have, so they confirm everything so it meets their requirements. And also we asked the Carter Electric to provide us with 4 revised sketch and description for some easements. One of them is on our property, and the other 3, because of the way it's laid out, we might have to modify them. So.
All right, thank you.
The extension, is that retroactive or that's moving forward for the 1-year extension?
It's moving forward.
Are there any questions for any staff from the commission? I talked to Mr. Forte today about this. I think it would be a good thing for the commission if we were to be able to have a workshop and have Mead Hunt come and give us a full update on where we are on the project. You know, it's been a long time. We've been in this process for a very long time, and there have been quite a few different change orders that have come and gone. And you know, it's easy when we look at one change order here or there, but I think over time they've started to stack up. So unless there's an objection, I would like to ask Mead Hunt come and give us a full update on where we are, where we're moving forward, and do that. And we could do it before a future meeting coming up, you know, whenever Mead Hunt is available at maybe 6 o'clock. Is there any objection to doing that? All right, Joe, do you have anything to add about this item?
We'll schedule it around David's availability.
Okay.
Mead Hunt.
Yep. All right, great. Thank you, Antoine. I appreciate it. At this time, we'll open this up to public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this item? Seeing none, we'll close public participation, and I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion needed? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now we will adjourn as the CRA and reconvene as the City Commission. At this time, we will open it up to public participation for public comments. This is about anything not on our regular agenda tonight that you would like to address the City Commission with. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the Commission? All right, seeing none, we'll close public comments, and we'll move down to approval of the minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on the minutes tonight? Seeing none, I'll close public participation. Any discussion needed? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Now moving to the consent agenda items, 1 through 2. Resolution 2020-R-21. Well, before I do that, the action proposed is stated for each item on the consent agenda. Unless the city commissioner removes an item from the consent agenda, no discussion on individual items will occur, and a single motion will approve all items. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on any item on the consent agenda tonight? Seeing none, I'll close public participation. Does any commissioner want to remove an item for discussion? I will entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. No discussion is needed. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Now moving down to our regular agenda, Resolution 2020-R-23. Mr. Forte?
Resolution 2020-R-23, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Holly Hill, Florida, authorizing change order number 4 to the US 1 Utility Underground Project to Carter Electric, and authorizing the city manager to execute the change order for an amount not to exceed $39,149.13, and 365 days for extension for final, providing for severability and providing for an effective date.
All right, are there any questions for staff? At this time, we'll open this up to public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the commission on this item tonight? Seeing none, we'll close public participation, and I'll entertain a motion for approval.
Motion.
Second. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
We have a motion by Commissioner Danio and a second by Commissioner Johnson. Any discussion needed? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Resolution 2020-R-24. Mr. Forte?
Mayor, I'd like to push this off. We go to the public hearings first. Scott Simpson, our attorney, is coming up here from South Daytona, so he is en route.
Okay.
So I'll need him for that item. So if we can jump to the ordinances.
Yep.
And we'll come back to that as soon as Scott gets here.
Yep. No objection. We'll move down to public hearings. Ordinance 2020-0-3026. Mr. Forte, could you read that into record?
Yes, ordinance 2020-0-3026, 1541 Garden Avenue, an ordinance of the City of Holly Hill, Florida, amending the land development regulations by amending the official zoning map to designate the property described in Exhibit A from R3 medium density single-family residential to CC1 commercial corridor district, providing for conflicting resolutions, providing for conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, and providing an effective date. This ordinance is presented for first reading.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Forte. Would you like Mr. Walker to take it?
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. The applicant this evening is Mr. Raymond Webb, and he is the owner of property on Garden Avenue, 1541 Garden Avenue. And he is requesting a rezone from R3, which is medium-density, single-family residential, to CC1, commercial corridor, and this is for approximately .344 acres. The R3 zoning district that's currently on the property is a residential zoning district. It's primarily found where you have single-family homes. The CC1 zoning district, as you know, is a commercial district. It's very broad. It contains anything from light retail and commercial to light industrial. So it is a very varied zoning district. The applicant's requesting the rezone in order to utilize the subject property for light industrial purposes. He owns a sign manufacturing company, and he wishes to be able to use that property to continue his sign manufacturing operation. The land use designation on the property is wholesale commercial and industrial, and the requested zoning district is compatible with the existing future land use. The zoning and future land uses surrounding the property, as well as an analysis for the specific site, is in your staff report. Two of the important things that staff looks at primarily when considering a rezone are whether or not the requested rezone is consistent with the Land Development Code and whether or not it is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. The requested CC1 zoning classification will recognize the current use of the property really for business purposes. Along Garden Avenue, touching Garden Avenue, there are 25 parcels, and 15 of those parcels already have CC1 zoning classifications. All 25 of them have wholesale, commercial, and industrial future land use. So really the overall intent of the area in time is for it to become more of a commercial area. With regard to the consistency with the comprehensive plan, one of the things the staff considers is flu policy 1.1.5. And that basically says that the proposal has to be consistent with the use and density aspects of the comprehensive plan, and it needs to be compatible with it. And in reviewing the rezone, it does appear to be compatible with the comprehensive plan. As well as policy 1.1.2, currently the property is vacant. And when it does come in, if it does come in for any proposed development, staff will make sure that it meets the requirement of not exceeding a floor area ratio of 1.95. So staff finds that the requested zoning classification is consistent with the comprehensive plan. At its meeting on May 4th, the Board of Planning and Appeals did unanimously recommend that the City Commission approve this zoning request. Staff recommendation is that the City Commission adopt the ordinance enacting a rezone from R3, medium-density, single-family residential, to CC1, commercial corridor district, for property totaling .344 acres, located on the southeast corner of Garden Avenue and Eleanor Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Is there any questions for Mr. Walker from the commission? Yes, Commissioner.
Brian, if it's changed to CC1, will there be any screening requirements? When you drive past there, it looks like a junkyard right now.
Yeah.
There
will be, and the applicant has submitted a permit for a 6-foot fence.
Okay.
All right. Does that satisfy, Vice Mayor?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Curry.
Brian, I'm to understand that they have had code enforcement out there, and they are in the process of cleaning that area up?
Yes, well, this action that the applicant is taking in rezoning the property and fencing the property will
Part of that?
remedy. Yes.
Okay.
This was kind of, it was the code enforcement that started this process.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Any other questions from the commission?
So it's on the east side of Garden, right?
yes.
It is just on the south side of their building they have now, right?
Yes, the property it was 3 parcels. He combined them into one, so it's kind of on the corner, went on Eleanor, and there was a piece.
It's like they're increasing the size of their own place.
Right.
Anything else, Commissioner? All right. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Is the applicant here? Would he like to speak? You don't see him?
He was
Okay.
at the Beaupaw.
All right, that's okay. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this item tonight? Seeing none, I'll close public comments, and I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion.
Second?
We have a motion for approval and a second. Is there any discussion needed?
No, that's good. We're very familiar with that area.
How about you?
Commissioner
Yeah,
Curry?
I actually don't understand why residential was allowed to be in that area years ago, and that's what I talked to Mr. Forte about, but we don't know.
Probably there first,
Yeah,
and the commercial encroach then.
but, so I think this makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big time. Any other comments? I agree, Commissioner Curry. And so with that, let's take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Moving to item 2, 1730 Birmingham Avenue. Joe?
This is 1730 Birmingham Avenue. It's a request for a side yard north setback variance from 8 feet to 0 feet and a rear yard setback variance from 20 feet to 8 feet in order to build a 2-car garage and an attached carport structure and a covered porch.
Mr. Walker, do you have anything to add? Do you have a report for us?
Yes, as stated, this is for 1730 Birmingham Avenue. They're requesting 2 variances, a side yard, which would be on the north side, up against the golf course setback from 8 feet to 0 feet, and a rear yard setback from 20 feet to 8 feet. Just a couple of things about the property. The property is approximately 12,500 square feet. It contains a house that's 27,000 square feet. It was built in 1980.
27,000?
I'm sorry. It's very tall.
Yeah, I guess so.
2,765 square feet.
It's better.
Built in 1980. A very, very small part of the property is in a special flood hazard area and does have an AE zoning designation or flood zone designation, but would not affect what they're proposing. And the applicant purchased the property in 2017. The house does front on an active golf course, so the applicant came in and made this petition showing that they have suffered damage to their vehicles. They had some windshield and auto glass damage, as well as chip paint and things like that on their home. So what they are wanting to do is build an attached carport on the north side of the house and a 2-car garage and covered porch, which would be on the west and back of the home. But in order to do that in the way that would satisfy their needs, they felt that there would be the need for a relief from the setback requirements. In order to grant the variance request, the commission has to find that the request meets the requirements of Section 82-317. Staff has reviewed these 6 criteria and finds that the applicant meets the criteria in order for the variances to be granted. The Board of Planning and Appeals, at their meeting on May 4th, did meet, and they did recommend unanimously approval of the 2 variances that are before this commission this evening. So based on that, staff recommends approval of the request for 2 variances from the Land Development Regulations of Holly Hill, Section 114-765, as follows. A side yard, the north side, setback variance from 8 feet to 0 feet, and number 2, a rear yard setback variance from 20 feet to 8 feet. Thank you.
And Mr. Walker, in our packet, we had a letter from, I believe, Mrs. Bartley, and I understand you received additional communication that now she is withdrawing that letter of disapproval, and now she's supportive of the project. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Would you like to comment on that?
Yes.
Is this what we have in front of us tonight?
That is, she called me when she got the notification of the variance, and we spoke, and she didn't have any objections at all at that time. So a few days later, I was surprised to receive a letter from her stating that she had concerns and really didn't want the garage and patio to be that close to her home. She felt that if there were parties, that they would interfere with her ability to sleep because her bedroom window is right there. So at the Board of Planning and Appeals, that was the letter that we had from her, which was basically a letter of objection. I think it was a day or two, it was actually on a Tuesday that she called me the day after the Bhopal meeting, and she said, you know, I'm sorry, I think I really confused things and I misunderstood really what they were looking to do. And she said, I really don't have any objections. I believe she had gotten to talk to one of the family members of the people who are requesting the variance, and her tone was more of what our original conversation was, which was one of no objection. So she asked that I withdraw it. I said, I can't do that without either you coming to the meeting and making that request, or a letter from you, and she said that she would supply a letter, and that was received today in the mail.
Okay.
And that's why it didn't have a chance to make it into the agenda packet.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Walker. Is the applicant here today? Yes. Would you like to add anything, sir?
I don't need to.
Okay. All right. We'll see if we have any questions for you, but I think you're okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Is there any questions for staff or for the applicant from the commission? All right. At this time, we'll open it up to public comment. Is there anyone? Yes. Mrs. Heidi.
Is that you, Heidi?
Is that truly you?
Is that you?
Hey there, this is Heidi Heller from 460 Ridgewood Avenue. It's probably a moot question to begin with, but I certainly appreciate the applicant investing in our city and making our house look better. The concern I'm understanding was the golf balls coming through. It's nice that he's building additions and other structures to prevent those golf balls from hitting his property. But to go back to the golf balls, is there a reason the city or somebody who owns that property that should be liable for those golf balls to put a screening up to stop it from happening? It's not as if I can drive down the street and something flies off the truck, gets my windshield, and it's my job to prevent that. It's the other person's job. So the city does the city own the property? They're not required to put a screen or anything, or am I missing something?
I don't believe so. Mr. Forte? Yeah, you can comment.
No, I was saying, as a previous golfer, I could tell you, if you live on a golf course, you expect to get hit.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's one of the hazards.
My
Well-
parents live right on the golf course,
Yeah.
and they actually, when I turned 16, my dad got me a car as a hand-me-down car, and the very first day I got it licensed and ready to drive, a ball went straight through the windshield, and I couldn't pay the $100 to get it fixed, so I had to wait a week to actually drive. But
So there's no
so that's life
responsibility
on
for that property owner,
No.
like a car driver or anything? Okay.
Sometimes
There's-
the Myers will let you go out and golf for free because you get
There's
golf balls
actually,
through.
let me back
about
up. And you ought to know because you're in the insurance business. There's a homeowner's liability, and then the person, let's say the person that's hitting the ball hits your window, breaks it, that person should have coverage, but they have to kind of own up for it. Isn't that usually how it works?
It's like, how do you prove it?
I mean, most time they
And A lot
don't.
of cities have screens, so, okay.
It's just the opposite.
Is it the homeowner that they're covered?
I've read some court cases that unless somebody actually intentionally tries to hit your house with a golf ball,
Mr. Simpson,
they're not liable for the
Mr. Simpson, can you come up to the mic if you're going to speak?
Golfers themselves are actually not liable for the damage they do just when they hit a slice or a hook.
Yeah, it's the intent.
Yeah, and now if you go over there and you intentionally aim at the house and you hit it, that's different, but
But there is coverage to a certain extent, right?
the homeowner may have homeowner's coverage to cover the damage, but they can't go back against the golfer for negligence, if you
So
will.
typically, is that an expense? They have a deductible, I
It'd
take,
be under
Probably-
$1,000 deductible.
Yeah.
I've actually just read a couple
for a
cases.
$2 Titleist or something, right? It's a souvenir, $1,000
Yeah.
souvenir.
Oh, yeah.
So presumably, if the golfer is not liable, then the golf course owner would not be liable for the conduct of their golfers.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Thank you, Mrs. Heller. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public participation, and I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comment?
Again, this makes sense.
That's it. Any comment?
I was completely against it until I found out it was 0 feet up to the golf course.
Yeah, to the golf course, yeah. Any other comments?
It might keep some more balls in play.
All right, is there any other questions or comments? All right, with that, we'll go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, now we're moving back up to Resolution 2020-R-24. Mr. Simpson, could you read that into record?
Want me to get the resolution?
A. You remember when?
Resolution 24? Okay.
Yeah.
Resolution number 2020-R-24 by title only for first and only reading. A resolution of the City Commission of the City of Holly Hill, Florida, approving a proportionate fair share agreement with Fountainhead Developers, LLC, for the development located at 1200 Center Avenue, Holly Hill, Florida, providing for severability, providing for conflicting resolutions, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you, sir. Joe, would you like to head it off?
Well, I'm gonna really turn it over to Scott. We spent a lot of time, a long time, working on the proportionate fair share. I explained it a little bit to each of you the best that I can. The agreement, for the most part, in and of itself, is been agreed to, in terms of the amount of proportionate fair share dollars that have to be paid for the project in the different phases. There's only two items that I have of concern with the agreement. One is the timing of when the proportionate fair share gets paid, and the other is the application fee. Let me jump to the second part, the application fee. In the incentive agreement, there is language that says that the city would waive all fees as part of the development of this project, and it references permit fees and inspection fees. At the time we put that agreement together, we never contemplated a $5,000 application fee for proportionate fair share, and I'm not comfortable waiving the fee. I made mention of this several times as we led up to this part of the application being submitted. I wasn't even going to keep it on the agenda unless the application fee was paid. It has not been paid. Keeping it on the agenda for the purposes of getting it moving forward. I don't want to hold the project up any more than absolutely needs to. So that still has to be discussed. If you look, Val's pulling this up, and I'll tell you where it's at, Val. If you just go down a couple of 3 or 4 more pages. Right there. No, down a little bit more. So when I spoke to their attorney, not the one sitting in the audience, a little bit more.
I think at the top of the next page, maybe.
Right there. Okay, so at the top of that sentence, it says, "The city and the agency agree that the city fees associated with the redevelopment of the property shall be waived to the extent the city can legally waive said fees, such as permit fees and inspection fees." So that was the context of the agreement back 5 years ago, 4 years ago, whenever we got into this part of the agreement. So when we got into this, we knew that there'd be a cost. It's in the fee resolution for prop share application fee. And I told him I'm just not comfortable waiving it. I don't think that was the intent of this. And the amount of time that Scott's put into it far exceeds that application fee, not to mention the rest of the staff's time, my time, Brian's time, Tom Horowski's time. So if the commission wants to waive the fee, then I'd rather the commission make that decision, but administratively, I'm not comfortable doing it.
Joe, has the fee ever been waived by the city in your knowledge?
This is the first time in my knowledge that we've gone through to do a proportionate fair share agreement.
Okay.
Lord knows if we'd done it before, we would have had a template.
Yeah. Yeah, we had to create everything new. I don't think we've ever done it before, not even for Marina Grande.
Okay.
Joe-
Vice Mayor?
Correct me if I'm wrong, even if the city commission were not to waive the fee, it would be reimbursable under their reimbursement
That's what I was
package,
about to
correct?
say before
That's
this
the second
came up,
sentence up there, yeah.
is the project is working also with attorney Mike Schimento out of Flagler County, and he had emailed me and requested that if the fee was paid, would it be a reimbursable expense under the capital expenditures? And I said, certainly, we would allow that to be. And then after that, I had another request to have it waived, and that's when I said, look, I'm not comfortable waiving it. So if you want to waive it, you can waive it at your discretion. If you don't want to waive it, you could, if you agree with the content of it, you can approve it pending authorizing the mayor to execute the agreement after the payment is made, or you waive it and you can execute it tonight.
When was the request made for waiving the fee? Because you told me that you've always said that this fee will take place.
About a week ago.
Okay, so
That would
it
be the
never
last
came
time.
up previously.
No, it came up. That's the last time it was probably mentioned.
I don't know when it came up.
Okay,
The first time is probably the first time we said, hey, there's an application fee.
okay.
So that would be,
I don't remember them.
I think probably, I started working on this in December, January, I think.
I don't remember.
Mike Watts is shaking his head, yeah.
That's when you
Yeah,
started.
December, January, we started working, somewhere around, I just, December 2019, yeah, January.
I don't remember them ever.
No, they did, at
Okay.
some point. So that's not the first time they asked for the waiver.
Commissioner
I'm
Curry?
going to wait till Mr. Simpson
To ask you
does
questions.
what he needs to do, yes.
That's fine.
Well, I can answer any questions anybody has about this. You know, obviously, what you have is you have a piece of property that is being developed that's going to have an impact on traffic. And that impact, if you go to the last the exhibit, and the study's been done, that impact's going to generate 3,287 trips. There was an existing development on this, which was the school. And the main reason why I put so much effort into this when it came up was I wasn't involved when we did the MDA initially in terms of traffic. There were certain things that I dealt with, and then there were certain things I kind of took more of a hands-off approach. Landscaping, building exterior, traffic, because Tom Horowski at the time was working with the county. The county was involved in this. Well, then Tom's not here anymore. Brian wasn't involved in it. And I could not in good faith recommend something to you. If I can't explain it to you, then I can't in good faith recommend it to you. So I had to try to learn as much as I could about traffic analysis. It was either that or we go hire a traffic expert, one or the other. And so, I met with Mark a couple times. I went over to the county to meet with them a couple times, because you also have the county that has traffic impact analysis that overlap ours. So, and what I've learned is it's not an exact science, far from it, to be honest with you. But in any event, you have a traffic impact study that was done. This project is projected to put out 3,287 trips. The existing or previous development calculated to have 2,346 trips. So that's their vested with that amount.
Even though it was empty for X amount of years?
Yeah, ours doesn't say that, and, I've gone back and forth with the county saying, well, does it ever phase out? I mean,
It's a 5-year phase out.
well, ours doesn't do that, though.
Ours does not.
Yeah. And so, there's a lot of things I've learned through this. Now that I go back and look at our proportionate fair share ordinance, I was like, maybe we need to fine tune this a little bit. But honestly, when I tell you this is not an exact science, and I don't mean to insult anybody who does this for a living, this is not an exact science. I've sat in a room full of people and that kind of stuff. But in any event, so you have that difference. You have the difference between the 3,200 and the 2,300 trips. So those are the trips that need to be paid for, and this is different from our traffic impact fees. So we have impact fees that they're going to have to pay. We've given them credit for that, and for water, sewer, police, and traffic, there's 3 impact fees they're still going to have to pay, and those are due as a condition of getting the CO. Everything we're talking about is a condition of getting CO for Phase 1, Parcel 2. So there's approximately between $50,000 and $60,000 of impact fees. That also includes traffic impact fees. Proportionate fair share deals with projects, impacts to particular roadways, whereas you can view an impact fee as maybe an overall impact, whereas the proportionate fair share now talks about the impact on specific roadways, and that's what the analysis did to come up with a cost of $760,000. And that, if you see on there's a $231 per trip cost. Well, if you take the 3,287, you divide it into the traffic impact fee analysis of what the cost is, that comes up with 231 trips. So then the question is, how do you allocate those trips with a phased development when we've agreed in our development agreement that it would be on a first-come, first-served basis? With concern, in discussions with Joe, with concerns that we don't want everything shifted to the tail end of the development. If you put all the credits up front and you shift everything to the tail end of development, we don't want to be stuck holding a piece of property that has no credits because this whole site was developed. So we're trying to address all those issues. So, and we've agreed, and this was something that was discussed early on, because of the way the workforce housing gets funded, that having an additional cost, having them to pay for their proportionate fair share on those units helps them in their tax credit calculation, somehow in their financing calculation, it helps them, they're able to get the money back. That's why you see no exempt trips allocated to parcel 4, because through the way that whole calculation works, they get more money if they have that cost there. So they get reimbursed from the state for that. So it was agreed that we wouldn't allocate any there. So, and it was also agreed that we would exempt out, what this does is exempts out the trips for parcel 1, phase 1, parcel 2, what they're building now. So we say, if you look and you see parcel 2, well, I guess it's all parcel 2. We've exempted 1,386 trips. So they can develop parcel 2 and use all their exempt trips. And like I said, don't confuse this with impact fees. It's different. They're still going to pay the impact fees. So parcel 2 gets developed, they have exempt trips. So basically we're saying, how do we allocate those exempt fees, the excess trips and the exemptions to parcel 1 and parcel 3? And then we came up with a calculation based on the percentage of trips generated based on the approved plans, the square footage. So that, because that's what they're vested, they can build up to. And it's based on an allocation of a percentage between parcel 1 and parcel 3 of the total trips. And that's where you come up with, for parcel 1, when they go to pull their first permit of with the construction over the exempt trips, right? Right. So once they pull a permit to construct a structure that puts the trips over the exempt trips for parcel 1, they will have to pay $53,906. And then they have parcel 3 is the same thing, where they will have, once they pull a permit to build a structure that generates trips that exceed the exempt trips, they will owe $27,300. So what could happen with this is, what it says is, once they buy parcels 1 and 3 from us, at that point, we're no longer stuck with a piece of property that we're worried about having the brunt of all of the proportionate fair share costs. They can then allocate the exempt trips as they see fit, because they own all the property. So they're allocating it within their property. So what could that mean is, they would probably allocate the trips that they wouldn't pay proportionate fair share costs until they get to the very last part of their development. I mean, that's just only the smart thing to do, honestly. So that's what I would do if I was him. So I would allocate and not pay the proportionate fair, not pay any proportionate fair share costs until I used up all my exempt trips. But until they own parcels 1 and 3, they have to pay based on the allocation formula we put in there.
Oh, so you can't roll over the exempt trips until they own parcel 1, 2, and 3?
In terms of rolling over, like shifting them,
Right.
they cannot until they buy them. So if they Until we own the parcels. Yeah, until you own the parcel. So if they buy, say they buy parcel 1, it's one of the things that could happen. They buy parcel 1, we still owe parcel 3. Could they shift the allocation between parcel 2 and 1? Yes, because they own it.
Oh.
But parcel 3 still stands, we still have our exempt trips on parcel 3, because we still own that. So we have the 317 exempt trips that they can't use on parcels 1 and 2, because we still own parcel 3.
Okay.
Now, once they buy parcel 3, then they can reallocate them as they see fit. What else could happen?
Do you have a question?
As I indicated.
Wait, Mr. Simpson, Vice Mayor.
So the exempt trips are set in stone.
That's already been done. We're not actually setting that in stone. That is done through, that was actually in the MPUD that we agreed to. That was already kind of set in stone.
My fear is that parcel 4 never gets developed with the golden goose of the affordable housing, and then all the affordable, proportional fair share gets shifted to that parcel.
Well, we've already shifted all 590 trips to that.
Right.
And so if that doesn't get developed as a workforce housing, that was agreed to, that cost would be shifted to that.
It would shift back if it's not?
No, it would still be,
Still exempt, no matter what it is.
parcel 4 has no exempt trips.
Yeah, parcel 4 as the affordable housing project.
Yeah.
Property has no exemption, so they pay the full burden of the prop share on that parcel. So the problem that comes up is if that affordable housing never happens.
Right, then it's unsellable, because no one's gonna wanna pay that.
Well, it's sellable, but
$100.
then you're going to have to modify your price based on the proportionate fair share that's been pushed to that property.
Okay.
Well, but when somebody comes in, if they don't build the affordable housing, they'll build something else. And that's, I guess the point is, say Fountainhead, which is probably going to happen, going to come forward and say, we want to change our development, and that change is going to be a major amendment that's going to have to go through, in essence, a rezoning process, come back before you for approval. They may shrink the size of the development. Well, as they shrink the size of the development, they're going to have less trips. And the way, this is like the last hurdle for me to get my head around, is the 760,000 was based on the percentage of trips generated by this project onto a road over the overall capacity of the road to come up with a 760. So if we have less trips, then that allocated percentage is less, and that 760 number would come down proportionally. You're still at 231,000. More, yes. You can tell me if I'm wrong.
It's a statistical analysis.
Yeah. So, yeah, even he admits it's fuzzy. So that was my concern, was they reduced the trips down, but we still have the impact to the road that doesn't get paid. I was like, we have to recalculate all this.
But
And
the trips are based upon a what-if plan that may or may not ever happen.
Mm-hmm.
So parcel 4 is intended to be an affordable housing with 590 trips. But let's just say it turns into a bank.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly not, it's certainly going to have a different, is it based on square footage plus use, or just purely square footage?
the square footage and use.
So typically what happens is if someone were to buy the entire project, all of the property, and they submitted the plans as proposed for all the develop on all of it, they would pay that proportionate fair share right up front. And that's the risk that they take for vesting that proportionate fair share. Our code says you have to pay that up front. And if you don't build to that, well, that's your loss. You took the risk. Now, in a phased development, which is what this is, they're not responsible for paying a proportionate fair share on property that they don't own. And issuing the credits on a first-come, first-serve is our risk as well, because, as Scott mentioned, it's possible that they don't completely build everything on parcel 2, leaving credits on the table that would then shift to parcel 1, and then parcel 1, which was originally supposed to be one building that they would pay upon application for a permit, is now 3 buildings. So the question comes up is, well, we don't want to pay the proportionate fair share until we I hate saying trip the trips, but until they trip the non-exempt trips, which may or may not happen at some point during one of those construction points of the building. It may not be to the last building. Then if there's existing credits on parcel 2, they'll shift that to parcel 1, and maybe no impact fee, no proportionate fair share would be paid there.
But all those potential changes would have to come back to this body to be approved as major amendments.
At this point, the
This could affect the incentives.
Correct. At
So
this
just-
point, the staff approved some changes on their development agreement that maybe could have come to the commission, but we chose to look at it as being minor amendments. We've told them that we drew the line in the sand now and said any change, regardless of its size and intent, would be considered in the totality of all the changes as a major amendment and would have to come back to the commission. We still have to come back to the commission to amend the PD to reflect the changes that have been, the language in the PD doesn't have to be amended?
Minor amendment, doesn't have to come before that.
Okay. So I fully expect that there'll be a change request, and we will end up in front of you looking at the total project again.
Yes, and I think the best way I was able to kind of get my head around it is to say they have the ability to construct improvements that generate 2,346 trips without paying any proportionate fair share, because that's what the exempt trips are. Because
Say
there
that one
was
more
an
time.
impact on
Sorry.
there.
Say that one more time.
2,346 chip generation can be, they can do that without paying any proportionate fair share. So regardless of what they build, how they build it, the timing of when they build it, anything that they build that generates a trip generation more than 2,346 is when they will start paying the proportionate fair share. And that will be at application for that improvement.
But it's, in this traffic study that was done, I'm assuming there's language or a formula that tells us when these trips begin. I mean, if
It's based on the use. If you, like,
When they pull
if
the
you looked at
permit,
it, you
right?
would look and say, it would say part of the, basically what it says is there's, I could actually put it up there, the analysis I did. Parcel 1, it would say these are the uses that are allowed there. This many square foot of a daycare, this many square foot of a restaurant. And so it doesn't say which one gets built first, but they say on parcel 1, this is what's permitted. And then you go to a traffic manual that will then tell you the number of trips, and that's what the traffic study did, based on those uses. So I took those uses, added those trips up and say, okay, parcel 1 generates this many trips. Added it to what parcel 3, so I got a combined total, and I allocated the exempt trips based to
Square
those-
footage.
based on the trip generation.
But I think the question is when does that take place? When they pull the permit before they even dig, or when they
Yes.
move in
No,
to the building?
When they file an application to build a structure that goes over the exempt trips they have, then they have to pay it.
Okay.
Now, right now, if we continue to own parcel 3 and they just own parcel 1, then parcel 3 stuff stays aside, that's ours, and those exempt trips stay with parcel 3. So when they develop on parcel 1, to the extent that they generate more than 643 trips on parcel 1, with that application, they're going to have to pay, with the understanding that they may have excess, either on parcel 2, there's 1,386 exempt trips. If they don't build to the full potential, there may be surplus exempt trips there that this agreement would allow them to assign to parcel 1 because they own parcel 1. So,
But one of the concerns all along has been that the building on parcel 2 may never reach the square footage that has been presented.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's true, then there would be trip credits.
yes, and that's why I raised the issue, just to let you know.
Yeah, let 'em-
So, but is there any way to not allow those trip credits to transfer?
Well, I guess we could say we're not going to agree to it, but if you go back and you look at the overall intent here is to say, if your product generates trips that exceed the impact that the previous development had, then you have to pay, then you don't do that, because you're basically telling somebody, hey, too bad on parcel 2, you didn't build to the full potential, but you can't do anything. You lost those exempt trips. You can't do them on other parts.
And
we look at the project as a whole.
I understand that theory if this was an incentivized project.
Mm-hmm.
This is highly incentivized by taxpayers' dollars, so we kind of hold the power, I think.
I think when they come back, if they want to modify, and they say, what you may hear is, we don't want to build a 3-story. We want to build a 2-story. Thing on the front, the wings or whatever you call it, wings?
Spaceship.
Spaceship, whatever.
Commissioner.
It's going to be smaller. That's going to be a major amendment that comes back here. And everything that you've said is a proper discussion item then, to say, we incentivized X, we're getting Y.
But how can we agree to this if I'm hearing that there's a very good likelihood that there will be some amendments back? Obviously, there's been talk amongst someone, you didn't just dream of this.
If they never exceed the number of trips that were there previously, there's no impact to pay.
Yeah. I think the best way to look at it is that property has 2,346 trips that can be generated before they
Right.
have to pay.
I get that.
And that's
No.
kind of,
No.
yeah,
100,
Yeah.
no,
the
because.
whole project.
The whole
Yeah, but they have to pay at 246, at 2346.
2346
After
exempt.
23.
Over 2346, they have to start paying.
No, over 13.
No, 32 is the total. 32 is the total trips on this project.
Oh.
2346 exempt.
Gotcha. All right. You're right.
Commissioner Curry?
Thank
Been
you.
waiting patiently.
Yes, I was very patient.
Sorry.
No, I can't make a motion right now because we haven't gotten there, but I'm going to throw this out there for everybody to have some food for thought while we're going through this discussion. I believe we're at the point with this project, we're 5 years in, not that I mind seeing you, but we're 5 years into this project. We all know that there's been several changes to the project, and we've been asked, our staff has been asked over and over to conform in a way that makes it easy for the project. And I think we've been over backwards to try to help. I'm not seeing over the 5-year plan what we were presented. And I said back when we first started all this that I love the development. I'm fearful that everything won't happen or happen in the time it's warranted. And I just think there's been so many changes that we should table this issue till a time certain and workshop and have Fountainhead present us with updated information on the project and bring us up to speed, up to date, because I really have no idea now of everything that's supposed to go on over there because of the changes that have been made. And I don't feel as though I can make a fair assessment in my decision with this item unless I have that information. And that's all I have to say right now. I'll wait till after all our discussion.
Make a couple comments on that. One is the whole incentive agreement was set up, whereas if they didn't perform, they didn't get paid. We have not given them anything because, as you indicated.
Well, we've given them credits.
No, we
Haven't performed.
they haven't. We
Well,
haven't
I'm
given them
saying
any-
credits on permit fees and,
Oh, we've done
and
those
things of that
yeah,
nature.
but in
That's what
terms-
I'm talking
yeah.
about.
And we've calculated out the impact fee credits they're entitled to, and as we did with this. But in terms of incentive money,
Oh, no, I know
we
we
still-
haven't,
yeah, we still
yeah.
sit
I
there
know
with
that
the
because
money.
they haven't met any deadlines. That's the
so
problem.
that's still sitting. What seems to be a crucial timeline here, and I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just saying for Fountainhead, a crucial timeline, is they're pushing to get a CO for Phase 1, Parcel 2. Because once they get the CO for Phase 1, Parcel 2, if you remember back a year ago, they were trying to buy Parcel 1. We went through that whole process, if you remember. And we had some reservations about that because it was all set up as you perform, you buy, and we kind of go through this process. But so we're holding their feet to the fire on, look, you need a CO before you satisfy our contract, and it gives you the option to buy Parcel 1, which then gives them the option to buy Parcel 3. So it appears to me that they're trying to finish Phase 1, get the CO, which then opens the door up for the contract for them to buy Parcel 1 and Parcel 3. That's my perception, which they're contractually entitled to do. I'll defer to Joe and Brian on how quickly they're going to get to a CO. And this is part of it. The proportionate fair share agreement's part of it. Paying the impact fees is part of it. But they also got to build and get approval, a final CO on what they're building. And so I'll defer to them.
Well, Mr. Simpson, my issue is, well, not my
And
only
what I'm saying
issue.
is we have time. In my
One
opinion.
of my issues is that They were told, you got to make this $5,000 fee payment for the application. Told sometime back. But here recently, now they've asked us to waive that.
They
I
asked
just
early
think
on.
we've been asked to do way too much without any significant progress. I love the project still, don't get me, I'm hoping it comes through, but I'm a little leery at this point. But I cannot even begin to approve this until I get an update on that project.
And that's fine. I was just telling you their side. But I mean, I believe in talking with Joe and Brian, this isn't holding them up from getting
Okay,
a CO.
so it's not,
Is that your statement?
No, and I asked the other attorney, I sent him an email last week because I feel like I'm missing something. There seemed to be a lot of urgency to get the prop share agreement in front of you. And we wanted to get it on the 12th, today. And about 2 weeks ago, there was a rush to Mark, get it done, crying out loud, I'm waiting on you, and Scott, get it done, and it's on the 12th. So I sent Mike Schmento an email. I said, what am I missing? What's the urgency that this has to get done? Because all of Exhibit C on Parcel 2 has to be completed before you get a CO. And based on my review of the project, we're still several months out from that being done.
see, that just leans a hand to my point, man.
And Mr. Watts, I will bring you up in a minute, but just as our attorney's up here, I'd like to get the questions to our attorney first. Vice Mayor?
I appreciate your sentiments, Commissioner Kerr. I think it'd be helpful if we had a workshop and had a presentation where we're at, where we're going to go, possible changes. But I think maybe I sent us down this rabbit hole by starting discussing it first. Looks like we only have two things to discuss tonight.
Right.
$5,000, are we going to waive it, or are we going to charge it and reimburse it?
Right.
And from what I understand, and the second question you had, Mr. Forte, is when do they pay that proportionate fair share fee? And what I'm hearing the attorney say is not until they pull a permit that exceeds.
That's what they put in the contract. Our policy says it gets paid when you buy the land, you submit your application.
And so in a perfect world, this all would have been done before there was a building permit issued for anything on Parcel 2, correct?
Yeah, and I can't really point a finger at blame for that.
No, I get that. So it's my opinion they should pay the $5,000, apply to get it reimbursed, case one, and then when they pull any permit that exceeds their trips on Parcel 1 or Parcel 2, that big number, they got to pay their fair share, whether they build it all or don't build it. I mean, but because it's been so long. I haven't been on the property. I drive past the property. It looks like a war zone. There's forms and things. I don't know what they're doing over there. I have no clue. They got some nice trees.
Because I drive past it all the time.
But I think maybe, Mr. Mayor, we could take one question and then the second question, maybe you could bring us back on track.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to do, but I want to give Mr. Watts the opportunity to come before us and speak to us a bit. You've been very patient there, so if you would like to present
You
to
can't
the
pay the more.
Yeah, he didn't care.
Hey, for the record, Mark Watts with Cobb Cole, 231,
Yeah. No virtual.
231 North Woodland Boulevard, DeLand, and I am just so grateful. This is my second live in-person meeting with an actual city today. I was met with Mr. Chisholm
Back to
and his
normal.
staff in Daytona this afternoon or this morning, whatever it was, and I think this is the first actual meeting I've been to at a city since March. So weird, for those of us that tend to have multiple of those each week. So I appreciate Scott and Joe and Brian and all the time that we've all spent kind of bringing this document to you this evening. And so I want to just simplify it as much as I can that, this type of an agreement and what we're doing in this exercise is really the intersection of constitutional law and algebra, which you really think those things should never really intersect. I became a lawyer to avoid algebra. But this is really all about constitutional exactions. When you're dealing with road capacity, when you're dealing with impact fees and everything else, what you're really talking about is a statistical approach to exacting, something out of a property owner in exchange for their ability to develop their property. So what we do with an impact fee typically is we exact out a fee that's based on a statistical analysis that is, for every trip you're putting on the road, how much does it cost the city? How much does it cost to expand the road network? So in the context of redevelopment, we have to look at things a little bit different. Think about it as a bucket. You've got a bucket that holds the volume associated with what's already on that property. The road network is that bucket in this case. There was a middle school there. It generated a certain number of trips, and those trips were in the bucket at one point in time. And so you can't then go back and exact additional dollars out of that landowner, out of that developer, until you need a bigger bucket. And so when we did when the original TIA, the traffic impact analysis that was submitted, they came up with that $760,000 number on the prop share. What that did is it looked at the PUD and what are the total impact of the PUD, and then what does it cost to put that many trips on the road. And the next step of the analysis, which is what we've all had to kind of go through, is when you're talking about that in the context of a redevelopment, when you already had trips from that property on the road, you then have to net out the prior trips. And so we actually, I think, improved on what was in the PUD as we went through this process, because there are a couple things, and they've been mentioned briefly. The PD says we're gonna basically use those exempt trips on a first come, first served basis. As the property in the PD is developing, we're going to start using those exempt trips first. And it didn't allocate it that a certain amount was going to be saved for this parcel and a certain amount was going to be saved for this parcel. And I think Joe and Brian and Scott had a very valid concern that sooner or later, the city is left holding a golden acre that costs too much to offset the impacts of the traffic, so that nobody's ever going to develop it if Fountainhead never bought it. And so we looked at the PD, and Scott and I have spent a lot of time together. I think we bought lunch at my office one day and sat there and kind of went through a bunch of different calculations on it. And
I have a feeling that somehow we paid for lunch, but go ahead.
I paid for it. I did pay for the lunch there. You paid for him. I paid for the Greek food, I think it was. But in any event, what we did was we tried to come up with, I think, something that was fair, a fair approach to the allocation that looks at the PD, the approved PUD agreement, looks at the uses that were allocated to the different parcels based on that, and said, okay, let's take these exempt trips and let's pro rata, kind of allocate them across the property so that you don't have that golden acre. Now, the tax credit financed affordable housing project, you treat a little bit different because the developer there actually gets more money from the state the more expensive the project is. So if he's got to pay that full freight on the prop share payment there, his 9% tax credits that he gets from the housing authority is increased because he gets 9% of that $130,000 as well on top of his project costs. That's why it made sense to kind of leave that in place there. But that's really kind of what this exercise has been. It's been how do we create something that's fair, that accurately accounts for the prior development that was on the property. And I'll give you an example. We talked about this kind of a lot during our meetings, but we did something really similar with the One Daytona project and the Speedway. If you recall, the Speedway, One Daytona, where that sits now, was the GE Park. The old Apollo era research park. And then we also had across the street at the track, we had the old backstretch, which had all those seats. Well, each of those seats, there was an impact fee associated with it, so there were trips associated with each of those seats. We actually, when we were working on that project, had to create a pool of exempt trips that then get drawn against for either the One Daytona project or things that they do across the street at the Speedway, and so. This has been really kind of a different scale, but the exact same exercise. And so what we ultimately came up with is looking at the ITE manual and applying kind of the trip generation rates that were used in the study, the TIA, and kind of applying them to the project and the costs. That's how we ultimately came up with that $231 per trip and allocated it across the overall property. So what you've got here now is very much just kind of that how do you apply that math? How do you take the PUD and kind of divide up that responsibility and those exemptions across the property in a way that's fair to the city and honors the intent of what the PUD currently says? I think that's really all I wanted to say. We did say, I think, with regard to the timing of the payment, if you look on, I think it's page 3 of 7, it's your page 1123. That was an impressive length for your agenda today.
Yeah.
1123 of your agenda, subparagraph, I think it's 2.5, Romanet 5, payment for due for any number for the number of non-exempt trips associated with a particular phase of development shall be paid upon application for a building permit authorizing construction of any improvement for that phase of development that includes non-exempt trips. So basically, again, going back to what's your legal basis for charging any dollars here? It's that constitutional exaction analysis. Your legal basis for it is you're starting to have an impact based on non-exempt trips going in and you needing that bigger bucket, or the county needing that bigger bucket to handle the traffic. We've set this up so that the first time there's a building permit that comes in for those non-exempt trips, then you have to make the payment for the prop share.
Did one do the same thing, or did they pay when they trip the non-exempt, or did they pay up front?
They pay when they run out of exempt trips. And actually, in that case, when you get to the end of the full build out of One Daytona, there's 15,000 trips still left in the bucket.
They'll never make it. Yeah, they'll never make it.
Yeah, because they had so many associated with the prior development there. I think there was something like 53,000 trips in the bucket to begin with there. So it's a big bucket. Yeah. So that's how we got here. And then the last point. I don't discount at all that I think there probably ought to be, and I don't know, I'm sort of in and out of this project at times, so I don't know what the consistent conversations are. I do think certainly there are other conversations coming with regard to what the overall build out looks like and everything else. I think the intent is still, to very much have something that the city and Fountainhead is going to be proud of with regard to the redevelopment. If you've been in the buildings over there, I know outside kind of looks a little rough at times, but if you've been in the buildings over there, I think they've done a really great job on the reuse of the facilities that are there. Val, can I ask you to put back up the incentive agreement? I just wanted to speak to the question of the $5,000 application fee. This I think came up when we first started having the conversation about getting the prop share agreement.
Excuse me, before we go to the 5,000, Val, could you start pulling that up if you know where it is? Do you know where? Okay, it's already up. But Commissioner Curry had a question.
Finish.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Vice Mayor, did you have a question before we moved on?
Yeah, just trying to get my head around the math, but we'll look at that in a minute.
Okay. Continue.
And so the reason I think that Jason and the Fountainhead team, we're looking at this, the operative, in the last section of that paragraph on top there, the city and agency agree that all city fees associated with the redevelopment of the property shall be waived, to the extent they can legally waive such fees. And then it gives the example of permit and inspection fees, but I believe when we filed the applications for the PUD, for example, we didn't pay the application fee. That was all part of what the fee waiver that's part of the incentive agreement in our view of things. So the 5,000 was just simply, I think Jason has looked at this and said, I have an agreement that says all city fees that can be legally waived are waived. Now, the continuation there where it says fees that cannot legally be waived, such as impact fees, shall be eligible redevelopment costs. When you're dealing with something like an impact fee, again, you have to go back to kind of that constitutional exaction analysis. When you adopt an impact fee, let me just say this, impact fees cannot legally be waived, period. An impact fee is either charged to the person who's under the ordinance responsible for paying that fee, or it's paid on their behalf by someone else. Otherwise, what you end up with is if you say we're going to waive impact fees, you have an impact fee that's based on a statistical analysis that says each trip costs X, for the government or for whoever is having to pay X. If you waive it, the next person who doesn't get it waived, their fee now is X plus something. And so you now have skewed the entire system because you're now shifting the costs that somebody was responsible for onto somebody else. Mm-hmm. And so now anytime you have an impact fee, it has to pass what's called the dual rational nexus test. It has to be both there has to be a causal connection, and there has to be a proportionality between the fee that's being charged to one person and the costs that are being incurred, or the fees that are being charged to someone else. And so you start, when you waive an impact fee, you start to run afoul of that constitutional test. So that's why the language here, it says, the fees that cannot legally be waived, such as an impact fee. You can't legally waive an impact fee. But an application fee, in our view, falls under the first part of that language here, that, all city fees associated with the redevelopment shall be waived. That's why we got into the discussion of the $5,000. It was just viewed as one of the fees it's an application fee. It's like the rezoning application fees that weren't paid. That's a fee that was waived by the incentive agreement. So.
Great, thank you, Mr. Wass. Commissioner Curry, you were first.
Thank you. Basically, you're asking us to shift around for the different parcels and credit and not have to pay parcel 1 at permit, parcel 2 at permit, parcel 3 at permit, and so on. Is that correct?
No.
No?
What this agreement, what the prop share agreement does, prop share agreement is really just an exercise in what does this project create from a road impact standpoint, what does that cost, and how is it paid? And the prop share agreement here has to take into account that the property was previously developed as something else. And so all this is a math exercise.
But you do not you, Fountainhead.
Right.
They don't want to have to pay the total amount due for each parcel at the time of permit. That's what they don't want to do.
Well, let me flip that. I don't think you can legally assess. I don't think, I'm not saying you, the city. I don't think you, the city, or the county, or anybody else can legally assess costs or collect a fee for an impact that doesn't exist yet. So here, until you pass trip 2, 3, 4, 6, because that's the number that we all agreed is the exempt number, until you pass that number of trips. And this is not a new concept here. If you look at, for example, and I'm not as familiar with the Holly Hill impact fee ordinance, but if you look at the county's impact fee ordinance, it says if the property is previously developed and that's demolished, then you don't pay a fee from an impact fee standpoint until you exceed the prior amount of development that was there. So if I have a 10,000 square foot building, I tear it down, I build 12,000 more. I don't pay fees except until I get to that extra 2,000, if it's the same use.
Mr. Simpson, because you know our ordinance, I'm trying to get this clear in my head. In other words, parcel 1, the $53,000 is due typically, and by our ordinance, when?
I'll read it.
Because, we don't address phasing
No.
or a situation like this.
Okay.
So,
Because I was under the impression it was due at permitting.
Well, actually, it's due, I'll tell you, this is payment of proportionate fair share contribution is due in full prior to the issuance of final development order or recording of the plat and shall be non-refundable. So it's due even before a permit is requested.
the unique thing here is that,
But they're asking not to do that.
well, no.
I'm trying to
because,
get it clear on what
No, 'cause
you're
I think
asking
there's one
for.
thing that's really unique about this. We own the property. We own parcel 1, we own parcel 3, so we can't ask them to pay impact fees on development that's on our property.
Don't want them to.
But we're not,
No,
I'm not talking
saying,
about
but-
on,
So we can't do it, we can't look at it from the standpoint of when we filed the first plat, they have to pay the impact fees for the whole property, because.
we're looking at 2.
that's not what I'm looking at. I'm
So-
looking at,
no, But I'm just saying, what
when-
Joe read to you.
okay,
So
when
now,
parcel
let me put you-
1,
Issuance of the development order.
okay, hang
The
on.
development order was when we did the rezoning, but we own most of the property under rezoning, we can't charge them an impact fee on land we own.
Right.
So.
But once
that's why
they
it's
buy
fair.
it,
So here, let me put it to you this way. If on parcel 2, they build and they have trips of 1,386 trips, those are exempt.
But my question is, let's go to parcel 3.
We'll go to parcel 1, because that's actually the next one.
Okay. Parcel 1, well, they've already purchased
No,
No.
It's
They have
parcel two.
parcel
that-
two.
Okay,
It's just
so, then I always get those confused. Parcel one, when they purchase it, they want to be able to wait to pay $53,000 and not pay at the time of purchase.
Right, because they have not filed an application.
But we do require that's paid then, right?
Time of permit.
At the time of the.
That's what I said earlier.
But not until
They come in and they file the application. If they file an
I
application.
got my information now because that's what I was asking, if it was due at the time of permit. But
only
you're
if-
not wanting to do that.
No, they are.
We are.
Only if they exceed the trips.
So say they,
credits.
let me put it this way, if they come in, if they use 1,386 trips on parcel two, and then they come in and they submit an application to build a structure that's going to generate 876 trips, they will pay $53,000 when they submit that application.
So what are they asking for?
Well, it's just, I'm just saying, it's an the agreement allocates
It memorializes this.
this. It says, look, we're spreading this over the phases as they do it. What we've discussed that could be where it gets gray, if you will, say on parcel two, they don't build a structure that generates 1,386 trips.
Right.
Now they have exempt trips on parcel one, or on parcel two that they didn't use. So they will then carry those over to parcel one. And they won't, so instead of having to pay when they exceed 643, it might be 743. Because they have 100 of exempt trips they didn't use on parcel two.
How can we protect that from happening?
Well, we have to allow it to happen because we contractually agreed, and I think, I'm glad Mark brought it up. We contractually agreed that all this would occur on a first come, first
Right,
served basis.
that, if you read the contract, and we already agreed to that, we really
Right.
don't have any
Agreed on a
discussion
first come,
about
first
this.
served
Right,
basis.
right.
So really, what they're offering us, I mean,
Now I see
honestly, to
what
me
you're
is sort
saying.
of a concession.
Right.
We said first come, first, that's what the agreement
Right.
says, first come, first served. We're concerned with, wait a minute, we didn't, first come, first served on the impact fees we were thinking about that because our impact fees would exceed it, you would still owe the money. But proportionate fair share, we were relying on the county to do all this. Really were.
I have another question.
So now, the first come, first served, if you go by the agreement we have, they don't have to pay until they use up all the exempt trips.
Exactly.
They're proposing to say, let's allocate them. They're making a concession to us by saying, we'll allocate it so we won't impact your exempt trips on parcel three until we buy it.
Right.
So you still have it. So what we had to come up with is, how do we allocate these exempt trips between parcels 1, 2, and 3, with understanding parcel 4 gets none, which is not something I initially agreed to. When I read it, I said, well, wait a minute, why are we not allocating some to parcel 4? Then I talked with Joe, we said, yeah, that's right, we need to talk about this.
Right.
So parcel 4 gets no allocation. They're agreeing to allocate exempt trips. They could hold our feet to the fire and say, per the MPUD agreement, it's first come, first served. We don't have to allocate.
Right.
So we have a concession here that protects the city.
Okay. Commissioner Curry?
Let me try to clear this up. You're actually required to pay the fee upon a development plan for that parcel being presented. You're wanting to wait until what you have built trips the
Planning to build trip.
Planning to build.
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
You want to wait and push off paying the $53,000 till further into the development.
Correct.
So what's to protect the city that you're actually going to go? I don't have any idea what they're planning to do now. That's why I say I need a workshop to figure all this out.
Well, and I think I understand the point where you're going to, and I think I can explain it. So the protection is, there's not a protection for the city to collect the money.
No,
that's
there's
due.
not.
There's no money due until you're creating new trips.
But it's due. It's due by our ordinance when you submit
So
the plan.
Let me give you an example, and so let me use an example of another phased project where we have to. So again, one of the things you have to do when you've got an ordinance that says one thing, but I think one of the things that we've talked about in the course of this is it doesn't necessarily contemplate that phased project. So let's talk about Minto. the Margaritaville project is one.
Right.
So when we looked at the Margaritaville traffic impact analysis with the county and the city of Daytona, obviously, if we get to 6,000 houses, there's a lot of impacts over the course of building out 6,000 houses. But we don't know how long it's going to take to get to that point. So for Minto, I think our first trigger, the first point at which a payment was required, was when we got our 500th CO. And I may be off on the numbers a little bit, but because it's a phased project, you have to kind of implement it slowly. Now, we built in a protection here, and I'll tell you, we haven't touched on that tonight, but I'll mention it in a second. But for a project like that, again, thinking about this from the standpoint of this is a constitutional, you're balancing the obligations you have as a government to provide for the citizens against the private property interest that you're taking if you take too much too soon, right? So here, we're talking about doing it on a phased basis because you have certain amounts of exemptions here because of the prior development. Whether this was even if this was the city.
I don't have a problem with each phase.
Right.
I don't say you need to pay us $217,000 now. You don't even own half the parcels.
Right.
I'm referring to when you do purchase a parcel, payment, you're not wanting to pay the payment when you submit the plan for that parcel.
Well, and so my point on that is because you have the vested trips from the prior development, you legally can't collect the payment. So one of the reasons why, we have a TIA that says $760,000 was the amount of the impact of the project from a dollar standpoint when you distribute that across the network. We ended up at $217,000. The reason that there's a difference between 760 and 217 is because that delta you can't legally collect.
You have a $542,000 credit because you have 2,346
Exactly.
trips.
Because those trips already were on the network, and whether it was me standing here for Fountainhead or whether it was
Oh, I don't argue
neighborhood
the
center
trips.
coming in or anything else coming in, those exemptions would
Yeah.
legally have to be
I
recognized.
don't argue that. I don't argue the exemptions. What I'm trying to get squared away in my head is the requirement for that to be paid
Yep.
and what you're wanting to do.
So what we're saying here is that we recognize the exemptions, and the first time, so consistent with your ordinance, the first time we're requiring new trips, now we've got the liability for those new trips and the offsetting costs associated with them under this. Now, the other thing that we did, and this is something that hadn't been done in previous agreements, but we incorporated it in here because the county has started doing it. The new county impact fee ordinance has an index factor for, so our $231.36 is a static number based on a study that was, finished almost 2 years ago now. What we've done is we added in the same language that the county's impact fee looks at here, and we've got it between a 3% and 8% inflation rate that applies to that on an annual basis. So that number will continue to go up until it's paid. And so that was, again, it was a fair thing to do to account for the fact that some things happen over time in a phased project. But I don't think from the standpoint of what we're asking, how that we've got this agreement structured, your prop share ordinance says when there's an impact to our system that requires a prop share payment, then the payment has to be made when a development order is issued for that project. And that's exactly what we say here, but we have to account for the vested trips first. So we consume the vested trips. The first time we submit for a permit that's above the vested trip amount, now the prop share liability is there and has to be paid in order to get the
Let
permit.
me ask it this way. On parcel 1, originally there was proposed a building that had multiple uses in it. If they were to come in and pull a permit for that building with all of those uses, that would trigger that.
Because you'd be vesting, because all of those uses represent 600 or 876 trips.
Right. So
we'd be vesting all
now,
of those trips.
the assumption is that one building that we originally looked at is now going to be 3 separate buildings. So now what they can do in reality is they could potentially build 2 of those and not trip.
Conceivably, yes.
And then, so we may never see the 3rd building built. It's possible.
It's possible.
So really it comes down to, the original intent was, here's one building, and if you were going to start to build this building because of the totality of the uses, it would be projected that you'd have to pay it upon that application. But now that the building is being broken up into 3 parts, well, we may never build the daycare, so we never trip it. So, but then you're right about one thing. It comes down to the next amendment to the PUD and your tolerance for changes to that PUD. So if that's the case, then I say, go ahead.
Right, but I
Allow
think-
this, but now you will be on the spot for approving any changes to the future PUD in its totality.
Right, but I think to your point, Commissioner Curry, is what both attorneys are agreeing on and saying is that the vested trips are there. We've already agreed to them regardless. And so until, there's no money to be paid until they go over those trips.
But-
And
I think one thing that's important, and
into the mic, Mr. Simpson.
kind of like 2 ways it could occur. One, per the MPUD, one, per the proportionate fair share agreement that's before you. Per the MPUD, it's first come, first serve. So they could build all of parcel 2, and that'd be 1,386 trips, exempt trips taken away. They could build all of parcel 1. That would be another 876 trips, and that's getting you pretty close, but they still have a few exempt trips left.
And they stick it to parcel 3.
They stick it to parcel 3.
They stick it to parcel 3.
And so parcel 3
So
is
the
where.
city
because
wins.
Because, but understand, we amend our regulations per planned developments. Our planned development
win.
agreement says first come, first serve. So back in December and January, Joe said, wait a minute, I'm worried about this cost getting shifted to the end. So they came back and said, let's just vest parcel 1, or parcel 2, our first part of our development, then we'll proportionally do parcel 1 and 3. Therefore, if we never buy 3, the exempt trips associated with 3 stay with it. The city's still protected. You got some exempt trips over there.
Okay.
So now, when they come in, I think that's a benefit to us. I interpret that as a benefit because we're protecting parcel 3. So when they come in, and as with Joe's example, they have one building now, they propose 3 different ones. One, that'll take your approval, but say they only build 2 of the 3 buildings. The impact of the 3rd building never occurred, the traffic impact. So they didn't build it, the impact didn't occur, so there's no reason to charge them for an impact that didn't occur.
And we legally cannot.
Right. So so what we've tried to do with this is say, protect the city until they start buying parcels. If they buy parcel 1, okay, between parcel 1 and parcel 2, which you own, you can allocate based on that, but you can't touch parcel 3 until you own it, because we still own it. We want our exempt trips protected. Once you buy parcel 3, then you can allocate with the exempt trips within the parcels you own. Joe and I want to make sure everybody understood. I mean, logically, they would shift them all to the beginning of the project, and so we may not see the money until parcel 3 is built. But they own all the land.
I get that, but as you stated and Mr. Forte stated, there's this parcel that now they're supposed to put 3 buildings on.
They haven't submitted for a
No,
formal
but
application.
that's my point. This project has gone so far from what it was
everything I'm telling you-
originally intended. I need to know.
And there's a big difference between what changes the staff has actually approved and the things we're talking about.
But I need
has
to
been
know
submitted.
how this project has changed,
Right.
because there is a lot of our citizens' monies vested in this, and I need to make sure, as the District 2 Commissioner, that I am being frugal with taxpayer money.
And that's a.
And I think
completely
right
legitimate-
now, I agree with you that we should have a workshop. And so, unless there's an objection to put together that workshop, Joe, if you could get with Synergy and their attorneys to set that up sometime before a regular scheduled workshop. So that way we can see what's going on, what's been done, what's
Absolutely.
the direction. And I believe that Synergy wanted that anyways. So, so let's
you,
do
Mayor.
that as well.
I even better understand this now about
Yeah.
the exempt trips. And I'm not as opposed to holding off on paying it until they exceed those non-exempt trips.
Right.
But like I said, that pressure is going to come on to you.
Right.
When they come to submit their plan for parcel 1, and they say, this is what we want to build, and you say, well, wait a second, that's not what we thought. We're not going to approve that.
I agree.
We're going to approve a big building.
I think that's where the debate's going to be. Vice
And
Mayor
that's
Penny?
where you're- Right. So I don't have a problem moving forward with this as presented.
Yeah. Vice Mayor?
And I want to thank the two attorneys here. That's $600 an hour explaining this to us. But,
I'm on a retainer.
but
I'm in the wrong.
I didn't have a clear understanding of all this, and I thought, well, this is a change, this is not good. But correct me if I'm wrong. I think we can all agree that the city cannot charge the developer any more money for this until they exceed 2,346 trips. That's a credit.
Right.
So however that gets to that.
Necessarily true, because if it
Because
were
of the
a
allocation,
project,
We could. Yes.
Now you can.
Yeah, now we can.
Under the existing PD,
You could.
it's first come, first served to get to 2346.
So this is better for the city.
Right, right. So we can't charge anyone any more money till those trips are exceeded. Now, under the current agreement, the developer can first come, first serve. So if they take parcel 2 at 1386 and parcel 1 at 1876, that's 2262 trips.
32. How many?
No, it's 870.
Oh, 800.
It's 2,262
Oh, you just
trips,
said 18.
which leaves only 84 trips, exempt trips, available for parcel 3, because there are no exempt trips for parcel 4. Right now, the city is getting an additional 233 trips exempt. Think of worst case scenario. If Fountainhead does not purchase parcel 3, we're going to have to sell it to someone else. And there's going to be a financial obligation of 200 and whatever it is per trip times 233 trips. That'll be passed on to the next developer that comes in.
depending upon the
I would
use.
look at it as exempt trips will be passed on. The cost could change, because if they came in with a new development, they would have to do a new traffic impact
Okay.
study, so the cost per trip could change. But there are that many exempt trips on that property.
Right, but when Mr. Watt said this is a concession to the city, I actually see that because when I talk to Mr. Forte, I was like, well, if they build 2, then, but we can't charge them anymore until they exceed the exempt trips.
This agreement basically memorializes that we are giving up that first come, first served language.
Right.
And allocating 40% of the
Right.
exempt trips to the city parcels until they're acquired.
And that's how I understand it, and I don't have any heartburn over it right now.
Right. Yeah, you can have a question, and then we're going to have to move to these questions, because I want to move this forward. Commissioner?
I just wanted to point out, that I think had this last 5 years gone in a different direction of promising and delivering, I don't think we would have wasted the last 45 minutes talking about this.
Totally agree.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I'm not holding you responsible. I'm just saying that, had Synergy been a little bit more on their game, we wouldn't have the doubts that we have.
No.
And I don't disagree with you at all. I'll say from the standpoint of and I have the fortune or misfortune of having been raised around all of this stuff. My dad was handled the cases that the Florida Supreme Court set the precedent for how you do legal impact fees in Florida about 2 years before I was born. So I've grown up around it, and I tend to understand how you can and can't do it. The agreement you're here today, you'd have this conversation whether it was Synergy or anybody. You still have the same facts there. There's a certain.
Oh, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that it would have been chewed up a little differently and taken a little bit in different context had we had a little bit better, track record.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of skepticism amongst this panel, and you could see it. It's pretty obvious.
And I think the workshop's a great idea, because I think everybody needs to understand where the project's headed.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner. And so now, I guess just the two things, we kind of worked out the second part about the proportional share question enough to where we can make a decision. But the first is to waive the $5,000 fee that's in our scheduled fee. I believe, Vice Mayor Penny, you said you would be against waiving that?
Well, I was until the attorney read the contract to me.
The waiving of the fee,
Well,
of the
It
$5,000?
says we will waive permits and fees that we're legally able to, and then it mentions impact fees shall be considered eligible for reimbursement. So I think this is a fee, a permit fee.
You know, but,
Mayor.
yeah, Commissioner.
I do not believe that was, well, at least it wasn't my intent. I can't speak for the rest of you. It was not my intent in that language to exempt something like this. I had no idea something like this even existed. So I can't have the intent to have included this. Didn't know about it. But my intent in this language was for the permitting and the simpler fees, if you will, and permitting. So my intent was not to waive something like this.
Mayor.
Had no idea.
Vice Mayor?
I don't think it was the intent of anyone to waive a proportional fair share application fee, because I don't think we were even discussing it, because if we were discussing, we hadn't even considered proportional fair share or application fees, or we would have had addressed this at that time.
That's right. It was not in the context.
It was
I
not in
was
the
not
context.
aware of it.
So I know it wasn't the intent to waive it because we weren't even discussing it. So I have to go back and rely on attorneys and judges and things that are going to interpret this language. I think, unfortunately, we have to live with that language. And
Well, I think the intent also has to apply to that. You have to have intent. And the intent's not there. None of us knew about it. I mean, maybe some of you did. I had no idea about it.
But you gotta live with what you signed. And
Not if it wasn't my intent. That was not in there.
I can kind of tell you from a pure legal perspective, when you interpret contracts, you don't get to the intent unless there's an ambiguity. If the document's clear on the face, then that's what you intend.
So are you telling me the document's clear on its face, no matter
I'm
whether?
telling you, before you get to intent, it doesn't say application fee. It says,
All fees.
such all fees, permit fees, such as permit inspection fees. After, I could probably make an argument that waiving any fee is illegal, to be perfectly honest with you. Because, for instance, I found out afterwards we did this, you can't waive inspection fees.
Oh, wow.
Permit fees.
Well, building inspection fees, the building inspection fee has to be used to fund the building department. So if you waive it for economic development, that's not being used for the building department, and that's in the state law. So arguably, waiving inspection fees was not even legal. But I didn't realize that at the time we did this, because everybody does it.
Yeah.
But there are cases, and it usually comes up when
Other developers complain.
well, when you have more money, then like it happened in New Smyrna, where they were collecting so much in inspection fees, the fees they were collecting exceeded the cost of operating their department. And they were transferring the money out to fund other operations.
It's a profit center.
Yeah, you can't do that. All the money has to be used for building inspection services. So here, if we waive a building inspection fee, aren't we now not using it for building inspection purposes, but using it for economic development purposes? I mean, you can make that argument.
Right.
So, the thing that I threw out, sort of in between, how much money are we holding of CRA funds? 18,000?
For what? For
Capital
about 8?
8,000? We're holding $8,000, which they're entitled to make a claim for reimbursement purposes, and they're in the process of evaluating those expenses. See if we can mutually agree, say, look, we'll just take it out of the money we're holding for you. So you don't have to come out of pocket and pay a fee and wait for us to reimburse.
Well, they'd still be paying it.
Well, they're still paying it, but they don't have to come out of pocket
Right.
and pay us and wait until they actually get reimbursed for it, because they have other reimbursables that would use that up now. That's a third option. That's something I threw out a while back to say,
Yeah.
we'll just take it out of the money we're holding for you.
Commissioner Daniel?
Unfortunately, I got to agree with Commissioner Penny. We kind of miss maybe, how would you say, our term there, right there. We might not have intended, but we kind of dropped the ball when we put that all city fees. And if they're going to get the money back anyway, our intention might be what, but unfortunately, we kind of have to go by what we wrote. So maybe something like,
it says all.
that's what I'm saying. I looked at it too. I was ready to squash it like a bug. But unfortunately, that's not.
That was never anything that was even brought as a thing that the
But it's
commission
there
would
now.
have to go over later. So that was never,
of conversation.
it was never a fee that we were aware of.
We've never done a proportionate fair share analysis in this city.
Right.
But we didn't pay application fees for the rezoning.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that, I think
So-
the way that this language has been
I
applied.
can tell you,
we
I
have-
could see the direction this is going, and I have no objection. I'm just telling you, I was not comfortable making the decision. But I will tell you, after several years of doing this, any amendment to the PUD is going to open up the incentive agreement, and we're going to have a long discussion
Right.
about the contents of the incentive agreement.
Right, that's when a lot of the
So-
discussion is going to occur.
Well, and
But,
Mayor, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Mr. Watts, what Mr. Simpson threw out, that third option idea, is that something that your client would be interested in doing it that way?
I can't answer for what, he.
All right, you haven't had that
tonight. I mean,
conversation.
I haven't had that
Okay.
conversation with him. I think that's certainly something that could be talked about. I can tell you my read on the agreement right now. That is, based on our discussions internally with our client, all fees was all fees. And while I certainly appreciate the points that have been raised, including that maybe is part of what comes up in discussion when we talk about the PD, revisions, we look at it as the current language is all fees were waived.
Okay.
And the practice to this point has been when we had application fees for like the PD rezoning, they weren't paid because that was part of the all fees.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Watts.
If you want my recommendation,
Yeah,
And we do.
my recommendation would be waive it. And the reason I say that is if I'm a judge, yeah, you didn't know about it,
It says all.
but it's in
You left out the word
No,
all.
I'm just saying,
yeah,
it's in
yeah,
your
if it just
That's
said
where we
such
put it,
as,
we
Well, that just puts another
So-
little dot in my not trust box.
yeah, but, well, I wouldn't say it's.
No,
untrustworthy,
it does,
but
because
it's something,
I wasn't aware of it when we first approved the agreement, and there's just been so much going on with this project in a negative manner. Mr. Watts, not your fault, I'm not.
I've got thick skin.
I'm not going to say that they intentionally knew that.
I'm not saying they
I don't think
intentionally
that's the
knew it. However, it's just been a collaborative process that's been building and building and building, and I'm at the point now, I'm very disappointed.
well, and I think a workshop will go a long way with that. But I think right now it's prudent legally for $5,000 to protect ourselves so that there could be no recourse on that. And
Yeah, we'll stick to the letter of the contract.
yeah,
Okay.
And we'll be a lot cleaner and a lot more,
gonna clean-
Oh, I
We have to
guarantee you
clean the
from
contract.
here
aware
on
and,
out.
the word "all" has a lot of weight to it.
Right.
I'll be honest, in probably starting in December, first time I ever heard the word proportionate fair share. Never heard it before. It's like,
I've
what is
never heard of
proportionate
it.
fair? First time, because a lot of, the little cities, they don't have these issues. Like,
Big
they don't
developments.
Get these projects that trip this type
yeah,
of
but
stuff.
when's the last time you heard the word all?
Well, it's all fees.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's unfortunately, that's been around since, yeah, I know.
So it wasn't like we were presented and said, hey, here's a list of all your fees. These are the ones you're going to waive.
Right.
We're thinking of all the fees we're used to waiving.
Right.
Now, I know Joe was unhappy with how many inspections they've been asking too. Remember, we tried to address that in the last amendment a year ago because
We're not doing inspections anymore. It's the plans reviews that
for the
were.
plan reviews, there was, just multiple, so many more,
Reviews.
so much more staff time was being used for this project than we reasonably anticipated when we agreed with that provision.
Mm-hmm.
But, same thing, we agreed with it, so, but,
And frankly, I think
Quickly,
Mountain Head
please.
would agree with that, with you on that, that it's
Okay.
taken a lot more to get to where they are now than they anticipated.
All right. Is there any other questions for any staff or applicant?
I'd just like to say.
Yes, Commissioner
I haven't
Johnson.
said too much about it, but it's pretty clear that it's written on this paragraph here, which is down the bottom of our long, drawn-out agenda tonight, 1,100 pages or something, that it says all fees will be waived, and even if they're not waived, they still get reimbursed. So what is the difference? I mean, if you charge them now and reimburse them later, what difference does $5,000 make on a reimbursement thing? And same thing with the impact thing. It comes right down to the point where you're really not charging the impact fee until you know you're going to be impacted. It ain't like you're doing it way up in advance. Okay, now I'm coming to this project where this is going to cause the impact and cause the police to have more cars on the road or whatever. That's when you charge the fee. It's really pretty simple. I mean, you can get upset. It doesn't matter. You still got to.
Oh, I'm not upset, Commissioner Johnson.
No, I mean, well, you.
Passion.
I'm always passionate.
All right.
And I've been dealing with this project for 5 years,
It's pretty
and
clear it written in the way the law is written, or the ordinance is written, it says right on there that all the fees will be waived, you know? And even if they're not waived, they're still reimbursed, so you're still not gonna collect them and keep them, you might collect them and give them back, right?
I think it's that upfront cost is what Synergy's looking for. All right, so is there any other questions for staff or the applicant? All right. At this time, we'll open it up to public input. Would anyone in the audience like to speak to this item tonight? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, and I will open the floor for a motion.
I would like to make a motion that we table this agenda item until after we've had the workshop.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? All right, the motion dies for a lack of a second. Is there someone else that would like to make a motion, or?
Is it for both?
Yes, it's for this item
I'll make a motion
to
approve it.
As staff,
And I'll second.
as recommended in the, let me make sure, hold on, before we
make
before
sure
we
that-
move on.
Probably be a motion to approve document as presented with, if this is what you're going to make the motion, with the waiver of the $5,000 fee.
Waiving the
Consistent
5,000
with the incentive agreement.
That's what I said. We
and the
have two.
proportional share as it is in the agenda.
Yep, as proposed with the waiver of the application fee pursuant to the incentive agreement.
Is that what your motion entails?
Motion to approve what
Okay.
Simpson said.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Discussion. Motion maker of the motion first. Any discussion?
I think we've pretty well
Yeah.
picked it apart.
Commissioner Johnson?
That's the only comments I have on it. I mean, I really think that's right. I'd like to have a workshop as well, because I wasn't in on it to begin with. I didn't know what all the detail was. I was probably the only one that wasn't in on it. And, well, I'd like to have a workshop on it and all, but still, it's pretty well cut and dry. Why postpone the inevitable? You gotta do it.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1. All right, moving on to communications. City Manager, yes, thank you.
See you later.
Mr. Forte, do you have anything for us?
So we're going to do a workshop on the overhead to underground, and we're going to do a workshop on an update on the Fountainhead project?
Yes.
Okay.
And you can work out the dates of that.
Yep, I'll do that. We're going to anticipate opening City Hall back up to the public on Monday, June 1st. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind, and we're putting the precautions in place to do that. And we are also, I have my staff who's been working to reduce their budgets in anticipation of not knowing what our revenues are going to be in these next couple of months at the end of this current fiscal year, going into the next fiscal year. So we've, each of the department has gone through, I've met with most everyone and trimmed it even a little bit more. So we're getting there. Now, the money is going to, it's not going to go back into the general fund. It's going to be held in their departmental accounts that if we don't need to pull it and we can still do whatever the projects are, then we will. But if we can't, then the money's there to protect ourselves, and we'll look at that as we go into planning the budget for next year. Again, a lot of unknowns still coming up. And as part of that, your training budget item was pulled. I don't think anybody's planning to go to South Florida in August for League of Cities conference. But the other item that we took out of there was also painting of the water tower, which I think was like $16,000. So we pulled that out as well. So just want to make sure that you were aware of that.
All right. What about the Veterans Memorial? Is that still in?
That's on hold.
Right now?
Nope.
That's on hold? Okay.
If anything that's a capital construction item, we've pulled back on. If it hasn't already been ordered,
Okay.
like a delivery of something,
Right.
then it's been pulled
Speak,
because
when you say memorial, I take it there's not going to be any memorial events, Memorial Day events, or?
I'm going to say I don't think so, that there'll be a Memorial Day activity here at City Hall.
Okay.
Yeah, I just thought it was.
We won't permit it? We won't allow it? Or,
I
They probably
don't
don't
think
have it.
we,
Okay.
I don't think we would permit it depending upon the crowd and, you know.
okay. Depending on where we are. Okay.
That's next weekend.
Yeah, it's a week and a half away.
What if we were to find a grant that paid for
what?
the Veterans Memorial out front?
We tried. If you remember, that one woman from
Yeah.
over in your neighborhood was searching for a grant for us.
Yeah, and we never found anything.
And,
Okay,
I mean, if we can find grant money,
then we can
by
do
all
it.
means.
Okay.
Grant monies are,
Free money.
Just double checking.
Just gotta pay tax on it.
Is there anything else, Mr. Forte?
no, that's it. You know, tonight was a good discussion, and we, you know, again, my position was I just was not comfortable doing it from an administrative process. I don't ever want the commission to come back and go, why did you do that? It didn't say that.
Yeah.
So it's a good discussion. It was lively. Val took the screen down. But if we're going to focus on the word all, then when we get to the next part of when we talk about all, when it says your final certificate of occupancy will be issued when all of the items on parcel 1, parcel 2, exhibit C are completed, I expect all to be upheld then as well.
There you
I'm
go.
going to just leave it with that, and all will come
That's
back
right.
to all of us.
All right, thank you, Mr. Forte. Much appreciated. So, you know, as Mr. Forte said, tonight a little different on this item. I appreciate the commission's input and the way that we could have a discussion the way that we have, instead of being too formal and asking for a motion, then discussing. I think that's a better way to do it on complicated issues that we can foresee, so
I
we don't have to
appreciate
amend
the-
several
The lenience
motions.
in the discussion.
Yeah. So the only thing that I have tonight is I was approached by Georgia McEwen. Some of you may know her. She's a lobbyist in Tallahassee. And she's working on a project for the county that has to do with LPGA widening, not in our city, but west of the highway. It's 2 lanes, and they want to go to, I believe, 4 lanes. There has to be a little bit
Is that what
further
you're
than
talking
that.
about?
Yeah, but all the way.
Oh, okay.
So they're looking at least 4-laning that, but they have to do an environmental study and a few other preparation things. And so they applied for a grant. I believe it's a federal grant, actually. And so they asked Daytona, Ormond, Chambers for a letter of support from that. So I was asked as the mayor to write a letter of support to that. We have one drafted up. There's really, other than the effect of you know, that traffic out there, there's no impact to us adversely by us supporting it. I think it's a good thing. It needs to be expanded. So unless there's an objection, I would like to sign that letter of support for that grant.
I agree.
All right, I see no objection. So that's all I have tonight. And first up is Vice Mayor Penny.
Something that we may be asked for our support as a city coming up is that the Volusia League of Cities had a board meeting today, and we were asked to support a resolution to present to the county council to put Echo and Volusia Forever on the ballot. There's been a lot of citizen requests for that and no action taken by the county council. So there may be a group come to us at a later date, probably sooner than later, as ballots will be being printed sooner than later.
I thought that the county was going to put that
Yeah,
on,
so
because
did
they
I.
discussed it in a
It
workshop,
It
but,
hasn't, at a workshop, they haven't taken formal action.
wow.
Because I thought they had discussed.
Yeah, we already
So,
talked about this, that's why we're thinking that.
anyhow, it may come to us, the Volusia League voted today to support that. So let the voters choose if they want to do it. So.
Okay.
Do you want to take action?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just in case it comes
Yeah.
up in a week from now and we're a week out, is there any objection to supporting that from any of the
Not
commission?
from here.
I think they've done a lot of good for us as a
I
city,
mean,
obviously.
you look at a lot of the projects that are funded wouldn't happen without.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Even-
so,
Look across the street.
so you have
Well,
the
and we've
authority to
taken
give our
advantage of it.
Okay.
support of,
Well, if you do that in the form of a motion, if I get a request that says, will the city of Holly Hill send a letter? If you already do it, then I'll be
Okay.
able to write a letter without having to come back to you.
Mr. Penny, would you like to?
I'd like to make a motion that the city of Holly Hill formally support Echo Involution Forever being placed on
I'll
the
second
ballot.
it for you.
We have a motion and a second. Anyone in the audience like to speak to this motion? Seeing none, we'll close public participation. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries unanimously.
That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Commissioner Curry?
Thank you. And again, thank you for the leniency in the format. And I just want to clear up, I wasn't angry. I do get passionate. Everybody's well aware of that. And this is an issue I'm passionate about because for 5 years now, I've been hearing from several of my constituents, what's happening at Fountainhead? Why isn't the project moving along? What is this? What is that? I can't answer them anymore because I really don't know what's going on with that project. That's why I didn't even want to vote on that item until the workshop happened, but it landed where it did. I think the commission made the right decision to have a workshop because all of us need to be updated. There's been so many changes, I have no clue anymore. So I just want to clear up. There's a difference between my anger and my passion. You'll know when I get angry. Which I try not to do anymore now that I'm older. I appreciate our loyalists out here coming through the, coronavirus. Every week you've been here, so I appreciate that. And that's really all that I have. I appreciate everybody putting up with my lengthy discussion on that topic. Apologize for taking so long, but I think it needed to be said, and that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner
Ms.
Daniel?
Curry, devil's advocate is always welcome on this council because it stirs conversation, it points out a lot of good and a lot of bad, and
Yeah.
we need that, so don't be apologetic. You said a lot of what we're all thinking, that you just said it, so. But yeah, we gotta keep Synergy accountable because that's where we lost the trust. I mean, it's been going on too long. Driving the city manager crazy, and that's not good. We need to keep
No.
sanity over there. Now, other than that, just continue social distancing, and let's hope that we get a little bit closer to the end. I'm afraid I've seen some things going on that just worry me, and I'm all for getting back to normal, but I don't know, we just got to be careful, especially for old guys like him.
Hey?
Hey, right, exactly, right. That's all.
And
Oh,
with
is it up
that,
to me
Commissioner
now?
Johnson? Yep.
Oh, I'm just glad to see that somebody else has taken an interest in the LPGA widening, really gonna do good. And
Yeah.
also I read in the paper where that Avalon Park is gonna agree to build a bridge for us for free, which that's a great thing, because, I think the TPO and the DOT and all had an agreement for what, like 8 years or so in the future there's gonna be, if maybe 10. And also, that's really a good thing. I like to push that LPGA project much as I can. And then, another thing is too, we just gotta keep moving ahead. Although we're in a shutdown and so many things, we have to open back up. We have to get going again. We have to just be careful and not take any unnecessary chances and keep things going. And this, I think we will. I think it'll be better, but we just got to be so careful of the economy right now because so many projects we want to do, and it was so easy to get them done before because everybody had the funding, everything's going forward, and now it's a possibility that things could come to a halt in certain areas, and it's a little bit scary to think about it. I remember what happened in 2008, 2009, and 2010 and up to there where we was in a real recession, and it was hard to get anything done. And by the time I got out of being mayor and let him get out of being mayor, the recession was over, so it was a lot easier for him. So the recession, being a mayor in a recession is not easy.
Being a mayor without the recession is probably not that easy either, is it?
Hoping we don't go into one.
No money for anything.
Don't say that, please.
I know.
I think we're still gonna go ahead. I think we're gonna, the pickleball thing is still on schedule. The gymnasium's still pretty much on schedule up on Norton Road. And, the only thing that really concerns me now is that it's been, 8 years we've been trying to start the underground project? About 8 years, I think.
We're going to do a workshop on, we have workshops
Yeah.
scheduled for that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's been pretty frustrating that it's just, never in my life did I think it was gonna take this long.
I remember when I was a mayor, I made a few trips down to West Palm area and made some deals with FPL and all on the project and all, but, and I thought it was pretty well gonna come about, and that's a long time ago, and it still hasn't hardly got off the ground, you know?
Yep.
So maybe the workshop will help, you think, huh?
Yeah, at least
It's just gonna tell us what's happening.
At least we'll see where we're at and where we're going.
I've had my share of arguments to get that thing moving.
Carter Electric's doing their part, right?
What's that?
Carter Electric's at least doing their part, right?
Everybody's doing their part. There's just changes in field conditions that are unexpected. You know, we had a couple of hurricanes that slowed us down. We had some field conditions that slowed us down. It's just,
Changes in attitudes and changes in latitudes right now.
Don't forget, a couple more weeks, we're gonna be in storm season again.
Yep.
I got a feeling it's not gonna be a real good storm season this year. I just
Well, let's start praying.
Yeah. Pray that it is a good one. That's all I've got.
Yep, Vice Mayor.
Forgot something important. Mayor Bill Partington from Ormond Beach is running to either be the second VP or the first VP for the Florida League of Cities.
Wow, about time.
Mr. Henderson, that was elected second VP, will be resigning and will not be able to continue. So that will leave a vacancy. He would be slated to be the first VP at the conference. The
Right.
conference
Right.
probably is not going to happen at this time.
Oh, really?
No one's going to South Florida in August.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not going. We don't have a budget to go. We don't have a budget to go anyways. But, so we're not sure which position he's going to be running for, but you may be asked, maybe contacted by some people on the nominating committee, so if you could throw your support behind him, he's a great guy.
Yeah, definitely. Well, not only a
Halifax-
great guy, but entrenched in the Florida League and the Florida League of Mayors, and is on many boards, travels multiple times a year to
just-
serve the board.
And
He would be a great president.
politics and the demographics fall into play because Orlando is going to be represented as the president this year, which would make the first VP probably not be a Central Florida person, so they would probably slate him if he's elected to second VP. They like to move it around. You know, North Florida, South Florida, Central Florida. So, but anyhow, just
How are they going to do the voting if they don't do?
I'm glad I'm not on the nominating committee
Okay.
because it's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah.
Just to figure
Yeah,
it
I'd
all out.
say.
So that's
Great news. Yeah.
Hey, while you mentioned the League of Cities, I also wanted to bring up that in 1998, when I first became a city manager and I went to the Florida League of Cities, David Rigsby was the president of the League of Cities, and he was a very passionate, you know, his slogan was, "Are you hungry?" And he did a great speech on that. I'll never forget it. And he was the mayor of DeLand, and he passed away this past year.
Right.
I wanted to, you know, just mention that because he was really, I don't know him personally, but he certainly embedded in my mind my first year going to a League of Cities conference with him as the president down there. And I just want to make mention of that.
Yep. Thank you. All right. Is there any further business before us? With that, we are adjourned.